All right, let's dive straight into Judges chapter 3 today. It really sets up this recurring theme for the whole book, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Right from the start, it gives this specific reason why certain nations were, well, left behind in Canaan. It wasn't an accident.
Okay, yeah, I remember reading that. It wasn't just that the conquest was incomplete, there was an intention behind it.
Exactly. The text says the Lord left them there first for the Israelites who hadn't seen the big wars firsthand, the ones born after the initial push.
Right, the next generation. And why? What was the point of leaving these potential enemies around?
Well, it gives two key reasons. The first one is pretty practical.
Which is?
To teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. Basically, on-the-job training. They needed to learn how to defend themselves.
Learn how to fight for the land they'd inherited? Makes sense, like keeping the skills sharp. But you said two reasons.
Yes, the second reason is maybe even more central to the book's themes. It was to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands.
Ah, so a spiritual test. Would they follow the laws given through Moses, or would they stray?
Precisely. Would they stay distinct, or would they, blend in with the surrounding cultures and their practices, which God had explicitly forbidden?
So these leftover nations, Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, all those groups, plus others like the Philistines and Sidonians cropping up, they were both a military training ground and a test of faithfulness.
That's the setup. A dual challenge, you could say.
So how did Israel handle this test according to chapter 3?
Well, the chapter doesn't pull any punches. It says they lived among these nations, which sounds innocent enough, but
But it wasn't just living nearby. The text gets specific about interaction.
very specific. It mentions intermarriage took their daughters in marriage and gave their own daughters to their sons. They started building family ties.
And that kind of social mixing often leads to religious mixing, right?
Exactly where it led. The text says flat out they served their gods, specifically naming the Baals and the Asherahs, Canaanite deities.
So total failure on the obedience front. They forgot the Lord, it says.
They did. They assimilated in the ways they were warned against. And the consequence described is immediate and direct.
Okay, what happened?
The anger of the Lord burned against Israel. It's strong language. And as a result, he sold them into the hands of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram Naharaim.
Sold them. That sounds harsh. This king from Mesopotamia.
Aram Naharaim, yeah. He becomes the instrument of God's judgment, essentially. The text links Israel doing evil in the eyes of the Lord directly to this oppression.
And this wasn't a short period. How long did this first oppression last?
8 years. 8 years under Cushan-Rishathaim's rule. A significant time of hardship.
So what prompts a change? They're oppressed for 8 years.
And then we see the start of the cycle that deflates Judges. It says, but when they cried out to the Lord...
You'll cry for help. In their distress, they finally turn back to God.
Seems so. Even if it's desperation, it's a turning. And the Lord's response.
He hears it.
He does. He raised up for them a deliverer. The first judge mentioned here is Othniel.
Othniel, son of Kenaz. And he's related to Caleb, isn't he?
Yes, Caleb's younger brother. That connection links him back to the, let's say, more faithful generation of the conquest. A bit of pedigree there.
So Othniel's chosen, but how does he actually, deliver them? Does he just get a good idea?
No, the text emphasizes divine empowerment. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. That's key.
The Spirit of the Lord.
Yes. And because of that, he became Israel's judge and went to war. His leadership, his military action, it's presented as flowing directly from God's Spirit, empowering him.
Okay, so empowered by the Spirit, he goes to war against Cushan-Rishathaim. What's the outcome?
A clear victory. The Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him. The oppressor is defeated.
Deliverance achieved. And what happens in the land afterwards?
Peace. The land had peace for 40 years. A whole generation, essentially. Stability returns. Until Othniel died, the text adds.
40 years of peace. That sounds like the lesson was learned. Finally.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But, well, the cycle continues.
Oh no. After Othniel dies.
Once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. It's almost depressingly predictable. The peace lasts only as long as the generation that experienced the deliverance, maybe?
So back to the old ways. And presumably back to the consequences.
Exactly. Because they repeated the evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel. A new oppressor, this time from closer by Moab to the east.
Eglon of Moab. And does he act alone?
No, he forms a coalition. He gets the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. They come, attack Israel.
And they succeed?
They do. They took possession of the city of Palms.
City of Palms. Wait, isn't that Jericho?
That's the traditional identification, yes. The very first city they conquered entering Canaan. Losing it would have been a huge symbolic defeat, a real blow.
Wow. Okay, so this oppression under Eglon and his allies, how long does this one last?
18 years. More than double the time under Kushon-Rishathaim.
18 years. That's a long time to be subjugated. What finally happens?
Same pattern. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. The suffering gets bad enough, and they turn back to God.
And again, God responds.
He does. He raises up another deliverer. This time it's Ehud.
Ehud, son of Jerah, a Benjamite.
And there's something unusual mentioned about him, right?
Yes, very specific detail. He was a left-handed man.
Left-handed? Why mention that? Seems random.
Well, it turns out to be absolutely crucial to his story and his strategy. In that culture, being left-handed might have been seen as different, maybe even a weakness in some contexts, but here, it's his advantage.
Interesting. So what's his mission initially?
It starts conventionally enough. The Israelites send him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. He's basically the messenger delivering the tax or payment.
Playing the part of the loyal subject, but he has other plans.
He definitely does. Before he goes, he made a double-edged sword about 1.5 feet long. A dagger, basically.
Okay, a concealed weapon. Where does he hide it? Which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. Now think about that. If you're right-handed, you strap your sword on your left thigh for an easy draw.
Ah, but he's left-handed, so strapping it on his right thigh
Means he can draw it easily with his left hand. But guards searching him might focus on the left thigh, the usual spot. It's clever concealment, playing on expectations.
Very clever. And we also get a detail about King Eglon himself.
Yes, the text knows he was a very fat man, which sounds a bit gratuitous, but it becomes gruesomely relevant later.
Okay, so Ehud goes with the tribute, presents it, sends his men away, but then he turns back.
He does. He turns back at the idols near Gilgal, maybe stone quarries or religious markers, and goes back to Eglon.
Why? What does he say?
He tells the king, I have a secret message for you. Intrigue. He hooks him.
A secret message. So Eglon wants privacy.
Exactly. He dismisses all his attendants. Quiet, he commands. So it's just Eglon and Ehud alone in the king's private upper room of his summer palace, cool and isolated.
The stage is set. What happens next?
Ehud approaches and says, I have a message from God for you.
A message from God.
As Eglon rises from his seat, perhaps out of reverence or just to hear better, Ehud makes his move. Left hand goes to the right thigh.
Draws the hidden sword.
And plunged it into the king's belly.
Wow. Just like that. The description is intense.
It really is. The Bible doesn't shy away from the visceral details here. It says, even the handle sank in after the blade, which came out his back.
Came out his back. Goodness.
And then the detail about Eglon's size. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. The wound is essentially sealed by the king's own body, hiding the sword entirely.
That's incredibly graphic and practical for Ehud's escape, I suppose. No obvious bloody weapon.
Exactly. So, having done the deed, Ehud doesn't panic. He calmly went out to the porch, or possibly onto a balcony.
And does what?
He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. Buys himself time. Creates a barrier.
So the king's servants come back eventually, find the doors locked. What do they think?
This is where it gets almost darkly funny. They see the doors are locked, and they assume the king is relieving himself in the inner room, using the private toilet.
Seriously, they just assume he's indisposed.
Yes, and they wait. And wait. The text says they waited to the point of embarrassment.
Yeah.
You can just picture them awkwardly shuffling outside the door.
That delay is everything for Ehud, isn't it?
It's his escape window.
Huh.
While they're politely waiting, feeling awkward, Ehud gets away.
How long do they wait before realizing something's wrong?
Until they just can't wait anymore. They get a key, unlock the doors, and find their master, King Eglon, fallen to the floor, dead.
And by then, Ehud is long gone.
Long gone. The text says, while they waited, he made his escape, passed by those same idols near Gilgal again, and got away to Sarah, likely in the hill country of Ephraim, back in Israelite territory.
He makes it back safely. What's his next move? Rally the troops?
Immediately, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, the signal, called arms.
And the Israelites respond.
They gather to him. He comes down from the hills to lead them.
And his message to them.
Follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. Again, attributing the victory to God, even after his rather cunning assassination.
So they follow him. What's the military strategy?
It's smart. They race down and seize control of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab.
The river crossings, why is that important?
It cuts off the Moabite forces currently occupying Israelite land from escaping back to Moab. It also prevents any reinforcements from Moab crossing over to help. They're trapped.
Bottle them up, and the result of the
A
battle.
massacre, essentially. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not a man escaped. A decisive, crushing defeat for Moab.
Wow. 10,000, that's a huge number. And the outcome for Israel?
That day, Moab was made subject to Israel. The tables are turned. Yeah. And,
Peace again.
yes, the land had peace for 80 years.
80 years. That's double the peace after Othniel. That's a very long time.
It is a remarkable period of rest following Ehud's deliverance.
Does the text give any reason why it was so much longer this time? 80 versus 40.
Not explicitly. You could speculate maybe the sheer scale of the Moabite defeat under Ehud, the 10,000 killed, had a more lasting impact than Othniel's victory. Or maybe the nature of the leadership, or just the passage of 2 full generations. The text simply records the fact.
80 years of peace. It's quite something after such a brutal story. Okay, so does the chapter end there?
Almost. There's one more brief mention of another figure, kind of like a footnote after the lengthy Ehud narrative.
Who's that?
After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath.
Shamgar. And he's famous for something unusual, right?
Extremely unusual. He struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad.
600 men with an ox goad. Isn't that just like a pointy stick for prodding cattle?
Essentially, yes, a farmer's tool. Maybe sharpened metal tip, but still, not standard military equipment. Yet he used it to kill a large number of Philistines, another of those nations left in the land, remember?
That's an incredible feat. Talk about using what you have. And he counts as a deliverer, too.
The text confirms it. He, too, saved Israel. His story is incredibly compressed here, just this one stunning detail, but he fits the pattern. Deliverance from oppressors.
So wrapping up chapter 3 then, we've seen the cycle play out clearly. Disobedience leads to oppression.
Israelites cry out to God.
God raises a deliverer, Othniel, then Ehud, then Shamgar briefly mentioned.
They achieve victory, often through, well, quite remarkable or even brutal means.
And the land gets peace for a while, until the cycle starts again.
And it all circles back to those opening verses, doesn't it? The nations were left to teach warfare and test obedience.
It seems they learned the warfare part when led by a judge, winning decisive victories. But that test of obedience.
That's the recurring failure. The peace never seems to permanently fix the underlying problem of forgetting God and turning to idols. The cycle itself proves that.
It makes you think about these judges, these deliverers. Othniel, empowered by the Spirit. Ehud, the left-handed assassin, using deception and violence. Shamgar with his farm tool. God uses them all.
He does. It's this fascinating, kind of messy picture of divine action working through very human, sometimes morally ambiguous methods in response to Israel's own repeated failings.
It's definitely not a sanitized story. It shows God meeting people in the midst of their cycles of failure, using unexpected people and methods. It makes you consider, maybe, how divine deliverance and human action intersect in ways that aren't always neat or predictable, even in our own lives or world. How does God work when faced with persistent human weakness and rebellion? This chapter gives you a lot to wrestle with on that front.
It certainly does. A powerful and complex start to the era of the Judges.